And so now we're going to move on to the second of two presentations in this section's theme on creativity, the arts and the sciences. And we're going to be joined now by Adam Paigge. Adam has recently joined STEAMhouse after working for his own company, working with a space industry focus. At STEAMhouse is building the new Immersive Media Lab. So what is VR? What is AR? What is XR? What does it all mean? That's something you'll find out now. So find out how Adam, alongside, I guess, as well, with a team of academics that we're working with, are contributing towards making Birmingham a cutting-edge immersive technology hub. So over to you, Adam.
Yeah, fabulous. And like it's going to be difficult to do better than the last presentation. It was absolutely fabulous. Like, it reminds me of a show where they were doing like the fluorescence on bugs, very similar to that. So this is extending reality. Let's look diving into the matrix now. So as part of STEAMhouse, we're funded by the European Union and working with East Side projects. I'm sure you've heard this all before. But what I'm supposed to be doing here is telling people about VR, XR, and all that kind of jazz. So it's like, how do we? Hold on 1 second. So this is me. I'm the VR and immersive technician here at STEAMhouse, and part of what I'm here to do is to get people thinking about VR, AR, XR, and how it can apply to their projects. The aim is to turn Birmingham into a VR hub, hopefully one that's nationally competitive, if not internationally competitive. And hopefully we can do that with some of the European funding that's come through. So like, we've been working hard to try and work out what the best intervention is, like how do we bring in national partners and start moving forwards with developing competitive businesses at a global scale. So what is extending reality? Like, it's the whole idea of like superimposing information on the world that we inhabit right now. Because obviously we see the world with just our eyes, and we have screens around us that serve as like sort of an intermediary between this data layer that exists behind it. So it's like, how do we bring that into our embodied reality? And how do we start like seeing contextually available data where we are and with what we're doing? So for example, you're at the train station and you can see all the times without needing to go to a board. So my passion for XR comes from the fact that it's a construct. The whole basis of it is that it's just a blank space. It is very much like, I mean, I don't know how many of you have seen The Matrix, when they drop into that kind of white space where it's like infinite in all directions. It is very much like that, where you can just invert your mind onto a space. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's like a whole different, I mean, it is another dimension to anything you can do with Photoshop or any photo tools. Just to link it back to what Deborah was saying before about the world being in our hands, like hopefully XR should be a tool for that, and it allows us to create that world. So just to link this back to what's relevant right now is that we're in STEAM conference, right? So what is STEAM, at least from my perspective? I mean, obviously we know it's STEM plus arts, but what are arts and why do they matter? Because there's been a massive focus on STEM for decades, and it's kind of meant that arts, I mean, just by nature of it, I mean, look at STEAM, right? For example, you've got science, technology, engineering, and maths, but then just arts. Each of those other in STEM are really part of science, so that the arts part of it isn't as resolved and has kind of been in deficit. So, and when arts are the expressive medium that you like gain context in the world and like start to understand like how doing things within science actually affect the world, you can begin to see like why we're having some of the like societal problems that we're having right now, because there isn't enough context and there isn't enough exploration of like how certain policies, for example, or certain applications of science are actually affecting the world. Just breaking down some definitions for everybody. I mean, I appreciate there will be a range of skill levels here. There tend to be in our regular meetups as well. Just to give you guys some definitions, we've got AR, VR, MR, XR, just all the Rs. So AR is augmented reality, the means of superimposing information inside your field of view. So you'll see headsets like the HoloLens, you'll see some of the newer headsets coming out recently, like Magic Leap, that will superimpose some images, let's say on a table or in your workspace, so you still have like some positional awareness. VR is full dive, so you are putting a headset on. They are effectively like headphones for your eyes, and that superimposes a whole new world onto you, but you lose that kind of awareness of the space you're in. So it helps have quite a big play area, and there's a lot of work trying to work out like, how do you make that safe. MR, mixed reality, is a specifically more proprietary term from Windows with the HoloLens side of things. It's kind of analogous to augmented reality, but they like to say it's like halfway in between, but really it's just augmented reality. And XR is kind of the catch-all term for all of them. Like X is the unknown variable, right? It's kind of everything mixed together, but also including 360-degree video and photos as well. So, welcome to the Extended Realities. Let's dive in. So, looking at the past, we've been over like quite a big hype peak, and at the minute we've kind of like we're climbing out of the valley of despair. I don't know how many people will know of this curve. It's like you get a huge hype, and then it drops off when people realize, oh no, wait, the applications aren't there yet. And then it starts growing gradually as businesses start working out how to make money out of it. The technology starts being more refined. And there was lots of clunky systems, and it was very graphics intensive, and it was quite slow, like really slow. So just in terms of headsets, this is one from NASA. This is actually a quote from one of the astronauts that was in the headset, is that I literally can't breathe in this. And the frame rates were kind of at the level of like 5 hertz. So like you would get like 5 frames a second. It was barely playable. It gave people a lot of motion sickness. It wasn't really feasible, but it showed the capability of it. And NASA still use VR today to train their astronauts. They actually use them to train on new hardware, or for example, in quite dangerous situations where they lose connection with the space station, how could they get back? So there's a lot of like, because there's infinite replay value with zero marginal risk, it's always been a great means of training people. In terms of experiences, yeah, mostly as a result of like just flashing images and low frame rates, like seizure inducing. So the image in this is actually an artist depiction of the Virtual Boy from Nintendo. It was all in red, and it was mostly just like screen switcher games. So there wasn't really the kind of fidelity of real life that we're kind of getting with VR now. So moving on to the present. So this quote is actually from a VC meeting with a VR software company, so building the software that goes on the headsets, where the VC, the venture capitalist, was actually supposed to be dedicated to immersive media and VR. So it kind of underscores like where the level of understanding is at, like even in like capital markets, in industry in general. And part of what we've been trying to do at STEAMhouse, we've got an event called VR Birmingham, which is a regular monthly meetup, is addressing this poor understanding of the technology and trying to educate people more. There's also quite a low rollout of headsets as well. Like they've only recently started getting into the sort of £500 range, where it's affordable enough that people can start looking into it as like an additional platform to like their PC or their phone, for example. But there is a lot of movement in that now, so I'll go into that a little bit later when we talk about the future. So in terms of the headsets, it's still a lot of cables. Like, for example, this is my setup only last year. They're still being shipped with LiDAR, like dedicated LiDAR scanners to like do all the positional tracking, and it's an absolute faff to set up. It is, and you can just see I mean, the reason I chose this image is like it's just like the aesthetics of that is like it's just not there. Like there's too much setup, there's too much like implicit knowledge that you need to even get into the space, never mind like just experiencing it straight off. But that is beginning to change. So Oculus are now doing some work with like wireless headsets, with the Oculus Quest that we have at STEAMhouse, and also controllers that are completely wireless as well. So you can, like, they're tracked from the inside out, and it means that you get an experience that's completely contained in a headset. You can just put a headset on and it works. And that in and of itself is like an enormous leap forwards. But it's going further than that. So Oculus right now have just released an update for hand tracking. So they're now moving from controller-based architectures to just using your hands. And your hands are the controls. So how do you, so like you know, with your phones, you've got gesture control, pinch to zoom, all this kind of thing. How all of this is currently being explored in VR right now. It's like, well, how do you bring your hands into the space, and how do they navigate that space in a frictionless way? Also, as an example of how this is being used already, actually, there is a social VR app called VR Chat, and Helping Hands have actually built a world within it for training people in sign language over large distances, just as like a little bit of a nugget of an example of how training and like co-locating in a physical space plus all this hand tracking can begin to coalesce. So in terms of the experiences, they are still not there. I mean, a lot of the experiences are based around sort of shock factor, like trying to get people to go out and walk on a beam at the edge of a building, and it's like it's all a bit scary and a bit like, ooh, like you're getting vertigo. And I don't know how long that is going to be a viable means of introducing people into the space. Like, we actually were talking with a company down in Bristol called Limina, and what they're trying to do is take from the sort of psychedelic hippie crowd, like how do they introduce people to experiences in a way that is like calming, it's all about set and setting, sort of being upfront about the fact that there will be a liminal transition between the world that you're in to this virtual world, and how to explore that in a safe way so you don't end up with experiences like this. So I'm hoping this will play.
Oh, you good?
And that is a perfect example of how not to do UX within VR and XR, because if you need to be creating experiences where people are they're at least conscious of their surroundings in some means, or have some understanding of the space they're in being not like separate from the world that they're in. So maybe there's some uses in augmented reality to sort of bridge that gap. So this is an example from Microsoft in their mixed reality headsets HoloLens about Minecraft and how that can be superimposed on top of tables. So they still have that positional awareness, but they can also understand that like some kind of data that's being superimposed on that. Another thing that we're looking into at STEAMhouse as well is embodiment. So Poppy, one of our academics, is quite big on embodiment and about narrative-driven stories. So something really interesting about VR in particular is like how do you can embody different people. I mean, you're not limited to race, gender, species, which I mean is a whole different kettle of fish entirely. But this is an example of an experience where they put you in the experience of a man traveling while black. So just a little side note from this. Black Lives Matter. And the whole basis of this embodiment work can really drive empathy. And as this guy was saying, and it's important. So moving on. Moving into the future. This is my world. So it's perhaps a strange coincidence that the Ready Player One was actually filmed about 100 meters away from where STEAMhouse is now. And the Oasis is in that world of virtual reality internet, synonymous with the internet, where people go to explore, they go to meet, they go to engage with content, and that is their world. So looking at headsets now, there's a lot of work going in. Like if you look at this now, Qualcomm have basically put out a standard that's been adopted by a whole bunch of headset manufacturers. And over the next couple of years, we should really be seeing a lot of augmented reality headsets paired with headphones with phones to deliver experiences out in the real world. So, I mean, like Pokemon Go, for example, like just a more high fidelity experience where you can actually go and explore and start overlaying data. Like imagine you had Google, but it was in your vision. So looking at the experiences, there's a lot of different things going on here, and a lot of experiments going on regarding hand tracking and how that moves forward in the future. But something I'm particularly interested in is how in that world, you're not limited to the physics of this world. You're not limited to the spaces within this world. And there's a whole bunch of technologies coming out down the line regarding haptics, where you can feel and bring your body into the experience. And I mean, just this weird Japanese thing that I found where a guy's bringing eating into the experience as well. So there's a lot of room for beauty in this space. And part of why I think Steam has a large role to play in this is that there's quite a lot of these science engineering that goes into building these headsets, but ultimately it is the next creative medium. Like there are spaces to be built, there are stories to be told, and ultimately this leads to a VR internet. Now, I would like this to start in the West Midlands. I think it could. But it would mean connecting with all of the expertise around the world and bringing it here. Because right now, when we got started, the West Midlands wasn't even mentioned in national documentation. And that's not for them trying to find out what's happening here. So a lot of what we need to do here is to advocate for VR businesses, but also bring that expertise here so that people can integrate it into their experiences and business models. For example, there are VR worlds now. Like if you look at VR chat, for example, like there are tens of thousands of individual experiences that you can go along, ranging from cyberpunk worlds to deserted islands to spaces where you can ride on jetpacks to beautiful music and more. Mostly people dress up as Nutella and hit each other with spoons. But the whole benefit of that world is you can choose avatars and embody that. I mean, people pay thousands for these avatars, not particularly the Nutella ones in particular, but they it becomes an expression of themselves. Looking into light fields, for example, it allows you to capture all the information in the scene. So it's different to 360 video where you would have, like, for example, a domed effect, and you would what it does is it actually captures all the information from a scene, like those early 360 cameras we saw earlier, but then it tiles it together in a sense where you can get the parallax, and it is indistinguishable from being there in the room. So also holograms. I mean, we're getting to a point where there are technologies coming down the road where they will be able to ionize the air and create 3D virtual displays in physical space. But until then, actual products that are available now are like these looking glass displays that actually display light fields inside a closed volume, and you get that same parallax. So imagine what happens when this gets miniaturized down to being a headset. Looking at art, for example, this is an example of a digital artist, VR Rosie. She built the International Space Station in Tiltbrush and has released this completely for free now. But also people are linking these digital artworks to cryptocurrency and looking at alternative models of ownership as well. And like, how do you exchange art if it's a completely virtual object? Women in VR is like a huge trend right now. I mean, it's I don't know whether it's a matter of the fact that it is a more creative medium, or like it's the fact that it is more spatially orientated. But for example, a lot of the women are heading up the major industry bodies. So Immersive UK and the Digital Catapult are both run by Asher Easton and Jessica Driscoll. So coming back to STEAM, it's not vaporware. Like the whole idea of science and technology building the hardware that then the artists come and give that context through these virtual experiences, I think will have just immeasurable value and an impact on society. So if anybody's interested, I've actually set up a Hubs link. So it's a social VR platform that allows us to discuss over the web, but in a virtual space. I will drop a link to that in the chat now. Okay, and you can join us afterwards. There's my details. Thank you very much for listening now.
Thanks very much, Adam, and another round of applause for Adam, please. There we go. Cheers, that was really great. It was good to have a really good explanation on the world of VR, AR, XR. I'm hoping that there are going to be people posting questions. You're welcome to post questions in the chat. I have some that I can ask as well. In the meantime, I will just start to give some feedback, Adam, in terms of what's coming through. Again, lots of love, lots of thank yous, great presentation. So I'm going to ask a question, Adam. First off, well, this is a question from me. Can you, as well, because I know that you've been doing a lot of work with some of our academics in BCU, can you just describe some of the work that you've been doing with our academics and who they are, please? I know we've put a link up to Poppy just earlier.
Yeah, so we've got Poppy Wild, we've got Robin Kay, that both are working on the Immersive Media BA, I think. You've got Alessandro, who's working in architecture, but also using trying to work out this visual medium for how do you display architectural models in that. There's also Andrew Walsh as well, who's working over in Hells with, they've just got another 15 headsets as well that starts to look at, I assume we can start looking into medical imaging in VR as well.
Great. For anyone that doesn't know, there is a regular program of activity around VR and XR, so you're welcome to get involved with that. Little plug there. Great presentation. Quick question, what is the difference between arting 3D vs 3D modelling in engineering?
So with 3D modelling in engineering, it's, I mean, this is like quite a well-established area. I mean, obviously you've got CAD, and it's designed to be very precise. The point being you can pull individual components out and actually manufacture them in the real world. Whereas with digital art and 3D art, it's a lot more like loose and sort of free form. Tilt brush, for example, it's using what they call like vertices and meshes to just draw ribbons and an effect in 3D space. So people are using them to do portraiture, they're doing larger pieces as well. There is an intersection between CAD and these kind of digital models as well, because you can mix both together. I think it's the big transition has really been between having what they call closed meshes, which is like the 3D actually manufacturable objects, versus open meshes, which is the more artistic, like free-form work.
Great, thank you. I hope that answers that question. We have one from Tom who says, to what extent do you see XR as being integrated into our everyday lives in the future, and are headsets a barrier?
So Oculus has been saying this themselves. They did a lot of research when they brought out the Quest about how, like, what do people want for XR? 'Cause I mean, for a long time, adoption was like quite a big problem, although it's really started taking off recently. Over the next couple of years, I think it'll be as ubiquitous as smartphones. Smartphones when they first came out. But people don't want the headsets. What they want are the experiences that come out of those headsets. And yes, headsets are a barrier to that in a sense, and I do believe that headsets will be a transitional technology. Like ultimately, we have to build the experiences, and you can see it with iPhone already. Like they are integrating augmented reality apps into their phones. When Apple do eventually bring out augmented reality headsets, they will have already done all the hard work to power that. But ultimately, I mean, it would be great in the future, and I mean, I don't know how far in the future this will be, where the data that we're displaying through augmented reality and virtual reality, we can just display in the physical world as simply as we can in augmented reality.
Okay, great, thank you. I think this is a follow-up question, actually, from Neil from Gorilla Drones. Is it useful to have access to real-life 3D model meshes to use within virtual reality, etc.?
Interesting. That is context dependent. Like there's, if you're looking at it from a social VR platform, that ultimately you need to be mindful of the fact that computing power is a premium for a lot of people. So when people are displaying architectural models, for example, in virtual reality, they'll often use a much scaled down version of it